Lucas Carter never asked to be a hero. He just wanted to keep his daughter fed, the bills paid, and his head down in a company that never saw his worth. By day, he's an overlooked systems engineer, fighting to stay afloat as a single dad. By night, he's the silent genius patching the cracks in Langford Tech's crumbling empire. But when the company's ruthless CEO, Victoria Langford, discovers her million-dollar AI project is moments away from disaster, she's forced to confront an unsettling truth. The only person who can save her legacy is the same man her board rejected as unfit for leadership. What starts as an unexpected partnership explodes into corporate scandal, whispered betrayals, and a fragile trust that neither Lucas nor Victoria know how to handle. He's a man who's lost everything but his daughter. She's a woman who's built walls so high she can't remember who she is beneath the title. When hidden enemies strike and secrets come to light, Lucas and Victoria must decide if they can rewrite the rules, not just to save the company, but to save each other. This is not just a redemption story. It's about how two broken people fix a system and find a family in the wreckage. Lucas Carter's eyes burned as the conference room door clicked shut behind him. He forced a polite smile, nodded to the junior associates who scurried past, and clutched the manila folder against his chest, like it might hold together the frayed edges of his composure. He'd known this meeting wouldn't end in fireworks and cake, but somehow, even prepared, the final blow stung worse than he'd braced for. Unfit for leadership. The words echoed in his skull like a bad echo chamber, each syllable bouncing off the years he'd traded away behind a glowing screen and humming servers. He'd done everything right. Put the company first, pulled triple shifts when deadlines loomed, never missed a release window. Except maybe when Lily was sick last winter, or when he couldn't afford a sitter and had to patch bugs with her dozing in a sleeping bag under his desk. He ran a hand through his hair, feeling the strands slick with stress. He could still hear them, the board's polite apologies, the hollow praise for his technical excellence, the patronizing comfort about better alignment for family men. As if fatherhood was an obstacle, not the reason he worked this damn hard. Lucas caught his reflection in the hallway glass. The man staring back at him looked older than his 35 years. Shadows under sharp blue eyes, shoulders hunched from carrying too much alone. Somewhere beneath the exhaustion, there was still the ghost of an ambitious young engineer who once dreamed of leading a team, changing the industry, maybe even innovating something that would bear his name. Not today, probably not ever. His phone vibrated in his pocket, snapping him out of the spiral. He fished it out, thumb trembling slightly when he saw the picture that popped up. Lily, 7 years old, her gap-toothed grin framed by a halo of dark curls. The text below. "Daddy, are you coming to the game tonight? Coach says I get to pitch." Lucas exhaled. The bitterness lodged in his throat melted enough to swallow. Of course she didn't know. She didn't need to know. She was the reason the rejection didn't destroy him entirely. He typed back a quick, "Wouldn't miss it for the world, superstar," and slipped the phone away. He straightened his tie as he stepped into the elevator, ignoring the awkward glances from a pair of HR interns who'd clearly heard the gossip. By tomorrow, the whole floor would know Lucas Carter, the quiet workhorse, got passed over again. Some would pity him, some would think he deserved it. None of them really knew him. The elevator shuddered to a stop on the lobby level. Lucas stepped out into the glass atrium of Langford Tech's headquarters, all sleek marble, polished chrome and floor-to-ceiling windows that reflected the city's ambition right back at itself. For a moment, he stood there, wondering how many more nights he'd spend inside this building fixing problems no one else could solve. How many more birthdays he'd half miss because a server hiccuped in Jakarta, or an update broke a warehouse's tracking system in Berlin. Maybe they were right. Maybe he wasn't a leader. He was a fixer, invisible until the seams tore and the stitches bled code all over the floor. "Mr. Carter," the polite voice jolted him from his thoughts. Mia, the front desk assistant, held out a brown paper bag. "You forgot your lunch. Lily must have packed it for you again. She dropped it off with me this morning." Lucas managed a genuine smile for the first time all day. He took the bag, feeling the familiar weight of an apple and a PB&J. Lily's signature, a little heart doodle in pink marker, peeked out from the folded top. "Thanks, Mia. I guess she knows I'd forget my own head if it wasn't attached." "She's a sweetheart," Mia said softly, her eyes kind but tinged with pity. He hated that look more than the rejection. "Yeah," he said, voice warming despite the day. "She really is." With that, Lucas pushed through the revolving doors into the late afternoon bustle of the city. He would pick Lily up early, take her to the game, cheer so loudly the other parents would roll their eyes. He'd save his breakdown for after bedtime stories when she was safely asleep and couldn't hear him cursing fate, bad luck, and a system that didn't know what to do with a man who could code all night and braid pigtails before dawn. Lucas Carter didn't have a promotion. He didn't have a corner office, a title, or a board's respect. But tonight, he had Lily. And for now, that was enough. Victoria Langford had long since learned that power rarely slept, and neither did she. At 3 a.m., she was still awake in her glass-walled office on the 32nd floor of Langford Tech's gleaming headquarters. Below her, the city pulsed with indifferent life. Late-night cabs, neon billboards, and blinking traffic lights that didn't care if the Langford legacy lived or died. She traced her father's name engraved on the brass paperweight at the edge of her massive mahogany desk. George Langford, founder. He'd built an empire out of an idea scribbled on the back of a napkin and a loan he lied his way into. He'd built it for her, or so he'd claimed, in the final days when cancer had eaten away at the Titan and left only a fragile old man with regret behind his cold eyes. She inhaled deeply, pushing back memories that never brought comfort. Tonight was not about the past. It was about the threat in her present. A pale young analyst stood stiffly on the other side of her desk, tapping his tablet with trembling fingers. His name was Aaron. Victoria didn't care enough to confirm it. "Say it again," she ordered, voice soft but lined with steel. Aaron swallowed audibly. "Ma'am, the predictive AI in the supply chain module is feeding flawed projections to the automated ordering system. It's over-purchasing inventory. Some warehouses are already at 80% over capacity." Victoria leaned back, folding her arms. "And this brilliant insight was delivered to me when exactly?" "About..." Aaron checked his watch, as if that might save him. 12 hours ago, ma'am. We flagged it last night, but you thought you'd wait until we were a few $1 million deeper in the hole before bothering me." Her tone was dangerously calm. Aaron paled further. I'm sorry, ma'am. We're working to trace the code anomaly. We think it might have corrupted during the last integration push." Victoria shot to her feet so quickly that Aaron flinched backward. She strode to the floor-to-ceiling windows, staring out into the city's cold lights, fists clenched at her sides. Integration push. Last update. New system. Words rattled around her skull like loose bullets. This system was supposed to save them. The investors were already circling, sniffing for weakness. Competitors were waiting to pounce the moment Langford Tech showed cracks. If this AI crashed publicly, she wouldn't just lose the quarter. She'd lose the company, and her father's ghost would mock her forever. "You have until dawn," she said sharply, turning back to Aaron. "Fix it, or clear your desk." He nodded so hard she worried his neck might snap, then fled the office like a startled rabbit. Victoria sat down, pressing her fingertips to her temple. Her mind raced through contingency plans. Spin it as a beta glitch, shift blame to a third-party contractor, fire the entire AI division as a show of strength. None of it would fix the reality. The system was broken. The team she trusted to build it had no clue how to stabilize it, and she was running out of people she could trust at all. A soft ping jolted her. An email alert, a late-night report from the audit division, flagged a minor code rewrite done without approval. Unscheduled update, solo push, unassigned credentials. L. Carter. Victoria narrowed her eyes. Lucas Carter. The name stirred a faint memory, unassuming background fixture, quiet reputation for fixing messes in the dead of night, not part of her golden circle of high-priced innovators and ego-driven directors. She tapped her keyboard. His HR file blinked onto her monitor, pages of performance commendations buried under an uninspiring title and a stagnant salary band. Single father, excellent attendance, 0 disciplinary marks. A ghost of a smile tugged at her mouth, gone before it fully formed. In the wolves' den of Langford Tech, someone like Lucas shouldn't survive, yet somehow he had. She glanced at the system logs. His patch hadn't just touched the edges. It dove straight into the core algorithm, rewriting lines that her entire task force tiptoed around for months. Victoria pushed her chair back, suddenly restless. She grabbed her blazer from the back of the chair, ignoring the dark circles under her eyes reflected in the office window. If this quiet man thought he could tinker with her system without consequences, he had a rude awakening coming. But beneath her simmering annoyance, an unfamiliar spark flickered. Maybe he was the rude awakening she needed. She strode out of her office, past the graveyard shift janitors and the half-asleep night staff. The entire tower seemed to shrink around her, the weight of her father's expectations pressing into her bones. If Langford Tech was going to survive this scandal, it wouldn't be because of a carefully curated task force or $1 million consulting team. It would be because she found the one man foolish or brilliant enough to fix what everyone else broke. And Victoria Langford had every intention of finding out which Lucas Carter really was. Lucas Carter didn't mean to break protocol, but when you're running on 2 hours of sleep, a half-eaten PB&J, and the terror that your daughter's flu medicine is overdrafting your account, you don't wait for approvals, you just fix the damn code. It had started as a minor bug report. A routine overnight alert pinged his inbox at 11:37 p.m., while Lily slept in her bedroom, her little nightlight casting stars on the wall. He could have ignored it, flagged it for the day team, but Lucas was a man who understood what tiny cracks did to fragile structures. He knew the value of prevention. He fired up his battered laptop, balancing it on his knees at his kitchen table. Lines of code danced before his tired eyes, but the more he traced the anomaly, the deeper the rot spread. What should have been a simple patch turned into the digital equivalent of open-heart surgery. Someone's sloppy logic loop had snowballed into a feedback error, Left unchecked, it would snowball into miscalculations, lost orders, and eventually an entire supply chain meltdown. He glanced at the clock. 1:15 a.m. He thought of Lily's field trip next week, the permission slip he still hadn't signed because he didn't know if he could afford the extra cost. Lucas sighed, cracked his knuckles, and dove in. By 3 a.m., he was half dead and half elated. The core model now spun clean test data with no recursive overflow. He sat back, letting the final diagnostic run, his eyelids sagging shut. He didn't even notice that he'd dropped into a doze until his laptop chimed a cheerful, "Build complete, 0 errors." Relief unfurled in his chest. One more problem quietly solved. One more crisis averted before it made headlines. No fanfare, no bonus, just a job done right. When dawn's first rays filtered through his kitchen blinds, Lucas jolted awake, groaned, and realized he had exactly 20 minutes to get Lily dressed, fed, and out the door for school. By the time Victoria Langford arrived at the lower levels of the server bay, her polished heels clicked on concrete, echoing through the cavernous temperature-controlled corridors. Security cameras panned as she passed, recording a woman who looked every inch the commander of an empire. Crisp navy suit, hair pinned to ruthless perfection, eyes that could cut steel. She found Lucas precisely where she expected, crouched behind a humming rack of servers, a mess of cables draped over his shoulders like a battle cloak. He was so absorbed in calibrating a heatsink that he didn't hear her footsteps until her shadow fell over him. Lucas jerked, bumping his head on the server door. "Oh, damn it." "Mr. Carter," Victoria said coolly. "Busy night?" Lucas scrambled upright, one hand rubbing the sore spot on his scalp. He froze when he registered exactly who stood before him. "Ms. Langford, ma'am." He hated the stammer that crept into his throat, but Victoria's reputation preceded her. She had fired the vice president's mid-board meeting. She had once personally shredded a contract in front of the press just to prove she could. "I want to know exactly what you did to my system," she said. No greeting, no pleasantries. Her eyes pinned him like a specimen. Lucas swallowed. He could lie, pretend he'd only tweaked a line or two, but lying never sat well with him. "I found a recursive loop in the core AI. It was feeding corrupted projections, so I rewrote it." Her eyebrow twitched. "A tell, maybe. You rewrote my flagship algorithm alone." "Yes, ma'am." "Without clearance?" "Yes, with no oversight." Lucas opened his mouth, then closed it. There was no point justifying the truth. Victoria stepped closer, invading his personal space without hesitation. "Do you understand the liability you exposed this company to? One wrong variable and you could have cost me millions, billions long term." Lucas forced himself to meet her eyes. "I know, but the system was days, maybe hours from a total operational breakdown. There wasn't time to form a committee, ma'am." For a heartbeat, silence hummed between them, thick with tension, and something else Lucas couldn't name. "You're either incredibly reckless," Victoria murmured, "or you're the only competent engineer I have left." Lucas didn't dare respond. He was too busy wondering if this was the part where security would escort him out. But instead of firing him, Victoria did something that shocked him more than her wrath ever could. She extended her hand. "I have a proposal for you, Mr. Carter. Walk with me." Lucas blinked, heart pounding. Whatever storm was coming next, he knew instinctively it was about to change everything. Lucas could count on one hand the number of times he'd been summoned to the executive floor. It was a place built for suits, polished shoes, and people whose mistakes cost other people's jobs, never their own. He felt like an oil stain on a white carpet as Victoria Langford's assistant ushered him past a line of polished oak doors and into the CEO's private meeting room. Victoria was already there, standing by the window that framed the city in a silver-blue dawn. She didn't turn when the door clicked shut behind him. For a long moment, the only sound was the whisper of the city waking up 30 stories below. When she did face him, Lucas braced for impact. He'd replayed every possible version of this confrontation during the short elevator ride up. The one where she eviscerated him in cold corporate speak. The one where security dragged him out by the collar. The one where he begged for a reference letter to feed Lily. None of them matched the reality of her expression. Her eyes were sharp, yes, but not just with anger. Beneath that was something else. Calculation, curiosity, even the faintest glimmer of respect. She gestured to the lone chair across the glass table. Sit. Lucas obeyed, trying not to fidget. She remained standing, a general before a court-martial. I had a long night, she began, voice as smooth as ice water. Do you know why? He opened his mouth, closed it, honesty always. Because my patch was unauthorized, because I rewrote your core without a sign-off. That's the polite version. Her lips curved, humorless. The impolite version is that my board is already whispering that I've lost control of my own product line thanks to a reckless engineer who went rogue in the middle of a billion-dollar rollout. Lucas swallowed hard, fighting to keep his shoulders squared. I'm sorry, Ms. Langford. It was never about going rogue. I saw the risk. I couldn't leave it to crash. Her gaze pinned him to the chair. He wondered if this was how prey felt just before the hawk struck, but then something softened and almost imperceptibly at the edges of her eyes. And you fixed it. He didn't know what answer she wanted. I did what needed to be done. You did what my senior architects couldn't in 6 months. You did it in one night without a team, without approval, and without asking permission. She moved closer, resting her hands flat on the table, leaning down until they were eye to eye. That should terrify me. Lucas felt a bead of sweat slip down his neck. Does it? A beat passed. Then, to his astonishment, she laughed. Low, sharp, a sound that seemed to surprise even her. It should, she murmured. Then her expression hardened again. But instead, it pisses me off that you've been buried under middle management all this time. My people knew your name but never your face. That's on me. He waited for the other shoe, the reprimand, the pink slip, the polite HR evisceration. Instead, Victoria straightened and said something that made his world tilt on its axis. I want you to lead a special recovery unit, effective immediately. You'll report directly to me. No middlemen, no red tape. You'll have whatever you need. Money, people, freedom. Lucas blinked, certain he'd misheard. You want me to lead? Yes. But the board? Let me worry about the board. His brain scrambled for the next protest. I have a daughter. I can't. The overtime. I can't work every night anymore. Victoria cut him off with a flick of her hand. You'll set your hours. Work remote if you want. Bring her here if you have to. I don't care. All I care about is you fixing the rest of this mess before my father's name is dragged through the dirt. Lucas stared at her, throat tight. For years he'd begged for a shot to be seen, to be trusted with something bigger than scraps. Now that it was here, offered like a gift wrapped in steel chains, he had no words. Victoria arched an eyebrow, clearly impatient with his stunned silence. So, Mr. Carter, are you in? Or should I go find another miracle worker before lunch? His mind flickered to Lily's school fees, the mortgage he barely kept up with, the late nights hunched over problems no one thanked him for. And now, here was someone demanding the very thing he'd hidden for so long. Lucas drew a slow breath, then nodded. I'm in. Victoria's smile was razor-thin but genuine. Good, pack up your basement desk. From now on, you work from the top floor. When he stepped back into the elevator minutes later, Lucas barely noticed the stares of the executives waiting to get in. For the first time in years, he felt like something more than a ghost in the machine. By the following Monday, the entire building buzzed with whispers. In break rooms and cramped cubicles, people traded half-true gossip over cheap coffee. The single dad from IT now sat in on C-level meetings. The ghost who worked overnight had a key card that unlocked every floor, even the sacred executive suite. No one said it outright, but everyone thought it. Lucas Carter had no business being Victoria Langford's new favorite. The old guard hated him instantly. Middle managers who'd spent years clawing up the corporate ladder suddenly found themselves cut from crucial update calls because Victoria didn't want dead weight slowing Lucas down. A few brave souls tried cornering him in the elevator to test his loyalty. Polite sabotage disguised as helpful suggestions. Lucas saw through every one. He learned to navigate the jealousy with the same quiet endurance he'd used to survive the graveyard shift. He reminded himself every morning while packing Lily's lunch that none of this was about popularity. It was about building something that worked, something that couldn't be broken by a single bad push or a missing patch. Victoria stayed true to her word. She gave him an empty wing of the R&D floor and told him to fill it with whoever he trusted. His first hires weren't shiny resumes from the Ivy League. They were overlooked coders like him, the ones who stayed late because they cared too much. When a disgruntled director tried to slow his progress by withholding critical test servers, Victoria crushed the rebellion in a single public memo that made the entire company buzz for days. She defended him so ruthlessly that rumors about their relationship bloomed in hushed tones. Lucas pretended not to hear it. He focused on his code, his daughter, and the quiet hours when Victoria would show up unannounced, lean against his office door, and argue design logic until midnight. He saw a side of her the board would never see. Sharp but tired, driven but human. One night he found her dozing on the couch in his corner lab, a laptop balanced on her knees. He draped his spare hoodie over her shoulders, careful not to wake her. For a moment, the fierce CEO looked so breakable that he had to remind himself who she was. Up there in that borrowed silence, Lucas realized this strange partnership was changing him too. The old fear, the small gnawing belief that he wasn't enough, didn't feel so loud when Victoria trusted him with her company's future. But for every bit of trust gained, enemies multiplied in the shadows, and Lucas was starting to learn. Saving a broken system was easy. Surviving the politics that came after was the real battle. By the third month, the pushback turned from petty rumors to outright sabotage. First, an incomplete patch slipped into the staging server. Then a critical test database accidentally got deleted on deployment day. Lucas caught every fire before it spread, but each one stole hours he didn't have. One Thursday evening, after sending Lily off with her grandma for the weekend, Lucas stayed late to run a final regression test. He caught a glimpse of Victoria pacing outside his glass office, phone pressed to her ear, voice low but fierce. He'd learned to read her posture. The tighter her shoulders, the closer someone was to ruin. When she finally ended the call and stepped inside, Lucas was too tired to stand. He just spun in his chair to face her. "Bad news?" he asked softly. She pinched the bridge of her nose. "The board wants a closed session Monday morning. They're not happy about your budget overruns, the restructuring, the leaks to the press. They think you're a liability." He let out a dry laugh. "They're not wrong." Her eyes snapped up, pinning him to the spot. "You are not a liability. You're the only reason this company is still breathing." The raw honesty stunned him. For a heartbeat, neither spoke. Then softer, she added, "I won't let them take you down to save their own skins. Not now. Not after everything you've done for me." Lucas heard it then. The slip. For me, not just for Langford Tech. For her. In that quiet moment with the city's lights flickering beyond the glass, Lucas Carter realized he'd crossed an invisible line with Victoria Langford. He wasn't just her fixer anymore, he was her gamble. And soon they'd both find out exactly what that loyalty would cost. Lucas woke before dawn on Saturday, long before Lily's giggles would echo down the hallway, long before the city outside their modest apartment would come alive with delivery trucks and commuters. He sat at the kitchen table nursing lukewarm coffee, his laptop humming softly under his fingertips. Lines of code flowed like blood through a vein, alive, restless, imperfect but improving with every pass. He was so deep inside a tricky optimization routine that he didn't hear the knock at first. It came again, firmer. Lucas blinked at the time on his phone, 5:52 a.m. He frowned. No one sane visited a single dad before sunrise. He cracked the door and froze. Victoria Langford stood in his hallway, hair pulled back in a messy knot, black hoodie and jeans instead of her usual steel gray suit. She looked like a woman who hadn't slept all night but hadn't cared enough to hide it. "Coffee?" was all Lucas could think to say. She stepped past him without waiting for an answer. "You didn't answer your phone." He checked. 12 missed calls. He winced. I had my headphones in. System benchmarks. Of course. She scanned his living room, taking in the scattered toys. Lily's art taped proudly on the fridge, a pile of laundry balanced precariously on the couch. If she was judging him, she hid it well. Lucas poured her a mug, trying not to burn himself in the process. He offered it like a peace treaty. "I needed to see you," Victoria said, voice quieter than usual, "before the vultures wake up." He sat across from her, heart doing a nervous dance in his chest. "What's happened now?" She traced a circle on the rim of the mug. "The leaks, the sabotage. It's escalating. I suspect 2 directors have a side deal to tank the system and sell our client list to a competitor. I can't prove it yet, but I will." Lucas let out a slow breath. "You think they'll come after me next?" Her eyes lifted to his. "They already are. You're the symbol of everything they hate. You made me look foolish and brilliant at the same time. They'll bleed you out in humor and paperwork until you quit." A beat of silence, then softer, almost a whisper she seemed to hate giving voice to. "I can't protect you alone." Lucas reached across the table before he could think better of it. He covered her restless hand with his own. Her skin was cold. He wanted to warm it, to warm her. "I didn't ask you to protect me, Victoria. I signed up for this mess, for you, for Lily's future." Her eyes flicked down to their joined hands, then back up. Something raw flickered in the steel gray. Something she'd never let anyone see in the boardroom. Before either could say more, a small voice squeaked from the hallway. "Daddy, who's here?" Victoria turned just as Lily padded in, all tangled hair and sleepy eyes. For a heartbeat, the fearsome CEO looked utterly human, uncertain how to greet a child she'd only glimpsed in passing. Lucas smiled and beckoned Lily close. "Sweetheart, this is Miss Victoria. She works with Daddy." Lily peered at Victoria, then at the empty coffee cup. "You look tired. Do you want my bunny? He helps me sleep." Victoria made a strangled sound, almost a laugh, almost a sob. She crouched down face to face with Lily. "That's very kind of you, but I think your bunny should stay with you tonight." Lily nodded wisely, then crawled into her father's lap, wrapping her arms around his neck. Watching them, Victoria felt something in her chest tighten, then crack. In that cluttered kitchen, surrounded by mismatched chairs and a child's innocence, she saw the life she'd never allowed herself to want. And for the first time in her carefully controlled existence, Victoria Langford envied another woman. The ghost of Lucas's late wife who'd left this gentle storm in his arms. Victoria rose abruptly. "I should go." Lucas stood too quickly, nearly upsetting Lily. "Stay, just for breakfast. She'd love it." But Victoria was already at the door, mask sliding back into place. "No, you have enough to worry about without confusing her." He wanted to argue. Instead, he watched her leave, the early morning light catching the edges of her hair like a crown she refused to wear. Outside, Victoria pressed a hand to her chest. It ached where Lily's offer of comfort had landed. She'd come to warn Lucas, but she'd left with a question she could no longer avoid. If she lost him to the company's treachery, if she lost him, period, what was left of her to salvage? 2 days later, the corporate battlefield erupted in ways neither of them expected. At first, it seemed like a routine Monday storm. Lucas arrived early. Lily dropped off at school, laptop in hand, armed with a fresh pot of black coffee and 3 hours of sleep. His team was already buzzing in the R&D wing, the trusted few who'd joined him out of loyalty or desperation for a leader who actually listened. But when he booted up his workstation, the red banner blinked. Access suspended. Contact administrator. He blinked, tried again, same result. Around him, whispers grew louder. Someone from HR hovered nervously at the glass door. Lucas rose slowly, a coil tightening in his gut. He didn't wait for an explanation. He stormed straight to the elevator, punching the button for the top floor so hard his knuckles turned white. Victoria was in her office, back to the door, phone pressed to her ear. He didn't bother knocking. "They locked me out," he said without preamble. She froze mid-sentence, turned, and read his face like code. No panic, just quiet fury. "Hold!" she snapped into her headset. She set the phone aside. "They called an emergency board vote at 7. You were out by 7:15. Lucas folded his arms. "So that's it? They win?" Her eyes flashed. "They don't win anything unless I say they do. Sit down." He didn't. "Victoria," "Lucas, sit down." Her voice cracked through him like a whip. Against his better judgment, he obeyed. She paced the width of her office, heels clicking like gunfire. "They want your head as proof that I can't play favorites. They think if they humiliate you, I'll crawl back to their safe little status quo." He forced himself to breathe evenly. "And you?" She spun, stabbing a finger at him. "You fixed my system. You held this company together when they were too busy scheming. You don't get thrown to the wolves to appease cowards." Something inside him cracked. The old, battered disbelief that people like him didn't get defended by people like her. Not really. Before he could stop himself, he whispered, Why are you fighting so hard for me? Victoria crossed the distance in 2 strides. She planted her hands on the arms of his chair, caging him in, her face inches from his. Because you're mine, Lucas Carter. Mine to protect, mine to keep. Her voice was barely a breath. And I don't lose what's mine. His heart was hammered in his throat. Words failed him, as they always did with her. Outside the glass walls, executives gathered for the show. They had no idea that the fight they'd provoked would cost them more than they could ever afford. And inside that office, one truth crystallized for Lucas. If he fell, Victoria would burn the whole empire to the ground to build it back. For him. It began with a single file, an anonymous leak to the press, painting Lucas as a fraud who'd faked his credentials to climb into Victoria's bed and steal her power. The gossip sites snapped it up like wolves. Within hours, talk shows debated the scandal, hashtags trended, and Langford Tech's stock teetered on a razor's edge. Lucas shut himself in his lab, rewriting code to keep his hands steady. He ignored the cameras outside the gates, the calls from reporters, offering hush money for a comment. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw Lily's face. What this might mean for her. What they might say on the playground. When he couldn't bear the silence, he texted Victoria, "Don't defend me, let me resign, save the company." She didn't reply. Not until 3 hours later, when she kicked open the lab door like a storm. "You are not resigning." He barely lifted his head. "I can't watch you get torn apart for me." She stalked him, grabbed his face in both hands, and forced him to meet her eyes. "You are not leaving me. Do you hear me? Not the company. Me." He couldn't breathe, couldn't think. He could only nod. The next morning, Victoria Langford strode into the boardroom like a queen marching to war. She dropped 2 folders on the polished table, one exposing the directors behind the leak, the other outlining a bulletproof audit trail of Lucas's actual work. "If you want him gone," she said coldly, "then you'll have to accept my resignation too, and good luck explaining that to Wall Street." Silence reigned. No one met her eyes. And in that silence, Lucas realized she'd done the one thing no one in his life had ever done before. She'd chosen him, over her throne, over her empire, and there was no going back for either of them. Victoria's shoes clicked sharply down the hallway as she left the boardroom behind her like a battlefield littered with casualties who didn't even have the sense to stand up. Behind her, men who'd once whispered about her cold heart and impossible standards were now stunned silent, stripped of leverage by a woman who would rather burn down her father's company than watch them ruin Lucas. She didn't slow her pace until she reached the glass doors of Lucas's lab. Inside, he sat at his desk, his daughter's drawing pinned to the wall behind him. A simple heart in crayon, framed by the words, "My daddy is a hero." Lucas looked up when she entered. He hadn't shaved. Shadows under his eyes said he hadn't slept. But when he saw her, his shoulders eased, as if her very presence meant the walls wouldn't fall in on him today. "Are we both unemployed?" he asked softly, a ghost of a smile tugging at his mouth. Victoria shut the door behind her and leaned back against it. For a moment she just looked at him, really looked. The way his stubble traced his jaw, the tired warmth in his eyes, the way he never once tried to hide how afraid he'd been of losing everything he'd built for Lily. "No," she said, "you still have a job. So do I." The board blinked first. Lucas laughed once, short and disbelieving. He rubbed a hand over his mouth, trying to mask the emotion, but failing miserably. You bet your whole crown on me." "I bet on the truth," she corrected, pushing off the door and closing the distance between them. She stopped right in front of him, close enough to feel the heat radiating from his skin. "I bet on the man who fixed my broken system when no one else could." She didn't say, "I bet on the man who fixed me," but the unspoken words clung between them. Lucas stood slowly, and for the first time in months, there was no guarded tension in how he looked at her. Just weary gratitude and something deeper, something that had been waiting, patient and undeniable. "Victoria, I don't know what will happen tomorrow," he murmured. "They're going to come for you harder now. For us." She almost smiled at that word. Us. Let them come. You and I don't break so easily. He reached for her hand, hesitant. She didn't hesitate. She took his, lacing their fingers together with a quiet finality that promised 1,000 sleepless nights, not just for code, but for secrets, laughter, and quiet moments stolen from the chaos. Outside the lab's glass walls, people stopped to stare. Rumors would fly, headlines would churn, but for this heartbeat, Victoria Langford and Lucas Carter didn't care. For once, they were exactly where they belonged. On the same side, no walls left to hide behind. The next few weeks felt like building a new empire on the ashes of the old one. Reporters swarmed the gates, hungry for scandal and a fresh narrative. Stock dipped, recovered, then soared again when news of the newly bulletproof AI system broke industry records. Lucas's team doubled in size overnight, then doubled again. Coders who'd once ignored him now begged for a seat at his table, drawn by the chance to work without the corporate handcuffs that had once strangled innovation at Langford Tech. And always behind him was Victoria. Some days she barked orders and ripped careless managers to shreds without mercy. Other days she drifted into his lab with 2 coffees and a softer look in her eyes that only he ever saw. At home, Lily adjusted with childlike ease. She told her father's new team exactly what snacks were acceptable in the break room and insisted on drawing Miss Victoria a new bunny picture every week. If the adults noticed how protective Lucas became, how he would stand a little too close to Victoria in crowded elevators, they politely pretended not to see. One night, well after midnight, Victoria found Lucas alone on the rooftop garden that overlooked the city lights. He was leaning on the railing, sleeves rolled up, tie long forgotten. The man who'd once hidden in the shadows of the server room now looked out at the skyline like he owned it. Or maybe like he'd finally realized it had never owned him. She stepped beside him without a word. For a while they just stood in silence, breathing in the crisp night air. Then Lucas spoke, voice rough but steady. "Do you ever think about the day you found me in the server bay? I was so sure you were going to fire me." She huffed a quiet laugh. "I probably should have." He turned and the city lights reflected in his eyes. "But you didn't." "No," she said, voice softer now, confession bleeding out with every syllable. "I couldn't." He reached up, brushing a loose strand of hair behind her ear. His fingers lingered against her cheek, warm and certain. "I don't know how to do this. For you. For us." Victoria pressed her forehead to his. "Then don't be perfect, Lucas. Just be here, stay. That's all I want." And for the first time in her life, Victoria Langford didn't feel like a CEO guarding an empire. She felt like a woman who'd finally let herself want something for herself. The months that followed didn't magically erase every obstacle. The same people who'd once tried to sabotage Lucas now fell over themselves to claim credit for his success. Competitors launched copycat products that flopped spectacularly. Their stolen blueprints no match for a system built by a man who never wrote the same line twice. Every day brought new fires to put out. Logistics crises, shareholder tantrums, the occasional scandal dredged up by bitter ex-executives. But every night when Lucas finally shut down his screens and crept into Lily's room to kiss her forehead, he remembered what it was all for. He never locked eyes with Victoria in the hallway without feeling the spark that still made him breathless. Not because it was forbidden, but because it was finally real. One spring evening, after a quarterly earnings call that silenced every critic in a single slide deck, Victoria found Lucas waiting in her office. He didn't say anything at first. He just crossed the distance between them, tugged her into his arms, and kissed her like there was no boardroom, no glass walls, no empire demanding her soul. When they broke apart, she smiled, tired, triumphant, undeniably his. What was that for? He grinned. For being the first person to bet on me. She brushed her lips to his ear, whispering the words she'd never dared say out loud until now. You were never my risk, Lucas Carter. You were always my reward. Outside her office, the city lights gleamed bright as ever, but for two people who'd spent their lives surviving broken systems, the real light, the one worth fighting for, burned quietly, fiercely between them, and this time neither one of them would ever let it flicker out again.